Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com. The press has worked very hard over the past couple of decades to get the public to associate fossil fuels with extreme weather. The idea being that if we keep using fossil fuels, everybody's going to die a horrible death. This has led politicians in Western countries into shutting down existing supplies of energy. 1 year ago, Boris Johnson said that 100% of UK electricity was going to come from renewable sources by the year 2035. But there is a very fundamental problem with these sort of actions by government officials. Over the past few days, the wind hasn't been blowing in the United Kingdom, and wind-powered electricity has been almost non-existent. In this time of year, there's very little solar energy available in the UK, even under the best of circumstances. So right now, almost all of the electricity in the United Kingdom is coming from fossil fuel and nuclear power. If the wind is not blowing, it doesn't make any difference how many wind turbines you have. They're not going to produce electricity. The UK government shut down reliable sources of energy without having anything to replace them with. This has caused energy prices to skyrocket, and now much of the country is facing fuel poverty. It would seem obvious to any rational person that you can't shut down the supply of an essential commodity without having something to replace it with. Governments can't rely on global warming to keep people warm because much of the earth is extremely cold. Temperatures in most of the United States, Russia, Asia, Australia, parts of Africa, parts of South America, and much of the oceans are running well below normal temperature. There is no evidence that the burning of fossil fuels is causing the world to overheat. So let's take a look at how Western countries got into this mess. Climate scamsters like Michael Mann have seized control of energy policy in many Western countries. And they've convinced people in government not to listen to fossil fuel interests. Let's examine whether this makes any sense. Oil, gas, and coal companies have developed the energy infrastructure which most of the world depends on for their day-to-day survival. By contrast, Michael Mann has no experience providing energy or any other useful product to the world. Politicians in the West have been bullied into listening to energy know-nothings like Michael Mann and not listening to the people who actually know about energy. Politicians are getting their energy advice from children instead of from the energy companies who've been providing the energy for over a century. This is irrational madness and a recipe for disaster. It's difficult for me to understand how Western leaders could be as foolish as the ones we've got now. Ever since Al Gore came out with his science fiction movie in 2006, children have been hearing nonstop propaganda about global warming and fossil fuels. This has led to mental health issues among many children. More than 70% of children aged 7 to 12 are now afraid of climate change, according to the results of a recent survey. School children are generally not allowed to hear any other opinions other than those designed to make the children scared and upset. They keep being taught in school that they're going to die in a few years if we don't stop burning fossil fuels. And this propagandizing of children has affected policy. In the center of this picture is Bob Inglis, who at one time was a respectable conservative congressman from South Carolina. One day he came home from work and his children told him they weren't going to speak to him until he did something to stop climate change. And this coercion co-opted Bob Inglis into becoming a useful idiot of the climate industrial complex. Now he regularly appears with climate scamsters like Katharine Hayhoe. Conservatives like Bob Inglis are changing the conversation about climate change. They're not doing anything to improve the climate, but they are destroying our energy infrastructure. But this is only a Western phenomenon. Countries like China and India are not falling for the nonsense. They're massively increasing their usage of coal. Which leads me back to Donald Trump's assertion from 10 years ago that what is happening is not happening by accident. All this talk about reducing emissions is meaningless nonsense. Governments have been making climate agreements for the past 30 years, which have done nothing to slow the growth of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The only thing these people are succeeding at is destroying our energy infrastructure. And apparently Michael Mann has made a lot of money in the process as well. Toto's been pulling back the curtain on this Western country suicide for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, Caesar, Toki Nupla on the web at realclimatescience.com.